So what do you make of what the judge did here? Any problems you find with her reasoning?
Well, first off, it was a stretch. As you pointed out, the evidence is ironclad, in my opinion, on the underlying case, both against Letitia James and James Comey. In fact, Letitia James, I think, is vulnerable on other charges as well, and so is James Comey. But let's break down what happened here. The U.S. Attorney statute requires an appointment within 120 days. And if there's not an appointment within 120 days, the courts can appoint until there is an appointment. This thing can be remedied by the Trump administration tomorrow. In other words, over 120 days had passed before this lady was appointed. And so the judge said, aha, you waited too long. Because you waited too long to appoint her, President Trump, all the indictments that came under her are invalid, which is ridiculous. There has never been a judicial ruling interpreting this statute that way. Ordinarily, what happens is, the initial interim U.S. attorney remains on. But all the president's got to do, all the Department of Justice has to do is reappoint Lindsay Halligan tomorrow, and then the next day re-indict both Comey and James. And they got a problem. Now, the question is going to be statute of limitations with Comey, but there's a way around that. Letitia James, there's no statute of limitations problem. She can be re-indicted by the end of the week. So the Democrats are howling a little bit too early here, in my judgment.
Does the indictment, is it null and void that she threw this out, or is it just stayed waiting for another situation? Can they appeal this rather than just re-indict?
They can appeal, but the dismissals were without prejudice. Contrast that to the Jack Smith case with Judge Eileen Cannon dismissed that for violations of the Constitution's appointment clause. That was with prejudice. But these indictments under these circumstances are without prejudice, meaning they can be re-brought. In fact, there's a statute within the U.S. Code that allows, if the case is dismissed under circumstances like this, the government can bring it back within 6 months. And that is the statute that the government will argue protects the case against James Comey's inevitable claim that the statute of limitations is now run against him. But this judge's decision, Grant, is unprecedented. The statute has never been used this way, to simply say it isn't just, based upon this ruling, it isn't just the Comey and the James indictments that have now been deemed null and void. It's any indictment that's come under this U.S. attorney, which throws the whole, criminal justice prosecutorial scheme there in Virginia into chaos. So she really stretched it here to try to save these two.
Don, it wouldn't surprise me if she knew exactly what she's doing. So if she says James Comey and Letitia James' cases are thrown out because she's not a legitimate U.S. attorney, well, then the drug dealer that was charged, the illegal alien that's going to be deported, all of those would be thrown out. Right. I think she actually knew what she was doing by doing this.
Well, I think you're right, and that's precisely the point. She's throwing out every indictment that's come under this new U.S. attorney who was just appointed, every one, and throwing the prosecutorial system into chaos. It's actually giving a break to all kinds of criminals who would have their indictments thrown out. So I think that probably you will see an appeal of that decision, but at the same time, I think the Department of Justice will, with regard to the prosecutions of these two, that is James and Comey, will probably re-indict, and I hope they do it sooner rather than later. Let's get this lady reappointed. They can reappoint this U.S. attorney on a 120-day basis, just like they were doing prior to Ed Martin's being tubed and torpedoed. And so I hope that they get her reappointed tomorrow. The president can do that without the approval of the Senate for 120 days, and they can re-indict with no prejudice, and we'll see where this goes. But I think you're correct. I think there was a method to this judge's madness, just to throw chaos into the legal system and the criminal justice system there in the Eastern District of Virginia.